right, thank you very much. Let me see if I can share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. All right, good evening, everybody. We are going to go through this quite quickly. And like you can reserve your questions to the end of it, but because at the end I would like it to be very interactive. That way we're having a great conversation. So adapting Agile to your environment, this will be the key talking points here. What is Agile? Because I know that there are some people that are joining this call that are just curious about what Agile is. So what is change? What do you apply? How do you apply and affect change? What is organizational culture, nature and nurture? Agilist versus Scrum Master. Engineering lead versus a product owner and a / system analyst. Cross-functional and self-organizing teams. How effective are your ceremonies? The Agile release trend versus team by team PI planning. Do your teams have working agreements or team norms? And questions and answers. So without much ado, we can start the presentation here, where you're going to find what is Agile. In my mind, I look at Agile to be a kind of a project planning, execution, deployment, and maintenance by self-organizing and cross-functional teams. And this is done through constant interaction, collaboration, and collaboration with the goal to deliver lean value to the customer. So when these teams get together, essentially they are doing their work incrementally, so that and be able to deliver to that to the customer at the cheapest or most cost-effective rate. So the Agile Manifesto summarizes it into 4 key principles, which are individual interaction, response to change, customer collaboration, and a working software. And these key principles here are really at the heart of what Agile stands for. And with the incremental software development, now it is a kind of binary because it gives quick results to the consumer so that they can give feedback as well quickly. And then to the team also has some value by delivering something and that can now motivate them to move to the next level. And then when they celebrate those results, it gets to wow the customer. And the customer feedback is important at this level because they get to know that and see whether there are certain things that they can improve upon. And that's why in some projects, you want to prefer Agile as opposed to a waterfall, which takes so long before they get that kind of feedback. So we switch gears and now get to change. So what is change? Change is making a ruckus. That's the way I express it. That is a disturbance or a commotion. Because when people are used to doing something in a certain way, they get used to it. So when you bring change, it's got to be a little bit of a disturbance or some commotion. When the status quo gets in the way of progress, change become indispensable. And therefore responding to change means progress, making a difference and influencing the stakeholders with a great idea, a ruckus. So when I talk about this great idea, you will see down there, like I said, it requires skill, attitude, behavior, and character. And the way that I define attitude is how you feel about somebody or something. And then I describe behavior to be the way you act on how you feel about somebody or something. And then character is now a combination of your attitude and your behavior, which is your behavior over a long time. That's how I describe those. And this is great, very, very important when change is concerned. And when you think of Tesla, what I call the Tesla effect, for instance, with electric vehicles, SpaceX, when you look at the effect that Tesla has brought to the industry, not just to the car industry, but to green, trying to stay green. You see the effects are just, you can't just measure them. And that's why Elon Musk, who is the founder, is now by far the richest person in the world, not just about the money, but making a difference. And that is what is very key here. Now, so how do you apply and affect this change? Because I've worked in organizations where there was change that came so abruptly and it was applied almost wholesale. And it was very, very disruptive. Not just that, but it brought a lot of bad feedback. So we have to prepare the stage by asking some probing questions. Those are not thought-provoking questions, and engaging all the stakeholders in the process, because they have to own that process. If the stakeholders own the process, when you bring your change, it's going to really move quickly and more successfully, because at the end, if it doesn't go well, everybody owns up to it. If it goes well, they own up to it. So change is good when it's gradual. So you make it incremental and instrumental. And when you want to be a change agent, you have to be methodic and a team player. Then why do you have to make change? It's not just making a change for change's sake. Take an example where you just join a new organization and you are probably an Agile delivery lead or Scrum Master, and you are leading those teams and guiding them. You want to make sure that you are making that difference by challenging what the status quo is. And because this is consequential, so you are going to sell the benefits, that is benefit, benefit, benefit to all the stakeholders. So when you do that, you also foresee any disruptions that may come along the way. And that's why you're going to have a plan B. That's why I said here that I wrote a poem, Hitches and Glitches, roll out, back out, roll back. I wrote that poem when I was leading, at that time I was leading 4 Scrum teams. It was such a big load. And one of those teams was 28 members, a Scrum team, basically 3 teams in one. So we had worked on a project, and this was deployed into production, and it didn't go well. So we had to back out because we had a plan B. If it didn't go well, because it was a project that was very new and very experimental. So we had to back out, identify the glitches that were there and stitch them, and then we roll it back, and everything was successful. It was after that experience that I wrote the poem Hitches and Glitches. You can find it on my LinkedIn page. It handles a lot of stuff there. So when you are making that change, you have to measure your progress. Then you redress the process and buckle up any positive outcomes that may come from there. So you are redressing the process, because along the way, not everything that you said from the beginning may go the way that you planned from the beginning. That's why you assess and redress. Now, from change, let's go to organizational culture, what I call culture, nature, and nurture. So being very poetic, I usually would choose words that are kind of, they put some imagery in your mind so that it helps you to be able to, really carry out the project that you are working on, and also help people to remember. So no 2 organizations are the same, even in the same industry. And if you have worked in more than one industry, you're going to realize in the same capacity, you're going to realize that they are not the same. Because each organization is set up in a certain way, that will be their nature. And when they are set, they become, it becomes their way of life, because that is what they know. That's what I call culture. And then they want to grow, they want to develop that culture, which is now nurturing it. That's why organization, culture, nature are nurtured. Now, Agile has to be agilic, thus adapted and responsive to stimulus. You could even make it stimuli, because it's not just one, it could be multiple. So if we are in the Agile environment where we're adapting, we have to be ready to embrace the change. And so that is why Agile is not a one-size-fits-all. So you look at your organization, master what it is, the needs of your organization, and then tailor Agile to fit that particular purpose. Then Agile can be applied successfully in all kinds of organizations without any exception. But you have to evaluate, estimate, relate, stimulate, and celebrate agilically. Because when if you do all those things and you are now rolling and rocking, celebrate at every milestone, celebrate your success. And then evaluate how far you have gone. Then you engage the stakeholders, bottom, top, and top, bottom. Why I brought this is that I was working in an organization where a lot of the top managers were not very familiar with Agile. So it was very difficult to work with them. So that's why I had a meeting with the Agile coach and suggested that it's very important to create these training sessions for those top managers. And that was done. And then the relationship became better, and we're able to produce more effectively. So that's why it has to be bottom, top, and top, bottom. So communication is very important, because if in order to tailor Agile to suit the organization, you have to communicate your vision, mission, and passion, and of course, take action and without procrastination. Because if you want to make that change and really go ahead, you don't want to be a victim of the aim game. The aim game is what I call procrastination. So that is very important. Once you make that decision, grasp it and just run with it. So this one is quite interesting. An Agilist or Agile delivery lead versus Scrum Master. We know a Scrum Master has been around for a long time. And if you're actually keeping yourself updated, you're going to realize that quite the nomenclature is changing from Agile to Agilist, or simply Agile delivery lead. So the traditional Scrum Master, as we know today, that title, I wholly believe that is going to become obsolete in the future, because the role is evolving with enhancement and enchantment. So now, when companies are looking for an Agilist or an Agile delivery lead, which are merging the Scrum Master role and the delivery lead roles. Very interesting. So those roles, you would argue that they were created in Agile to be separate roles, right? But the world is behaving, the world is evolving all the time. The industries are evolving, and because of the evolution and the changes and the needs of those organizations, they realize that it's important for that particular role to evolve. So an Agilist, if you're conversant, it simply means that you should be conversant with multiple frameworks or methodologies, whether it's SAFe. The key three that most organizations use are SAFe, Scrum, Kanban. Now, there are many other methodologies or frameworks out there. The test-driven development, feature-driven development, now extreme programming, DevOps, or we're using, of course, dynamic systems development method, and many others that that you all know, those who are in this in the industry, you know. So when I talk about dynamism and flexibility in the software delivery lifecycle, because you want to mix and match those methodologies. And I've done that successfully because I look at the scope that we have, not just the scope, but the project that we are trying to deliver on. And then I could always borrow from one methodology or the other to enhance Scrum, Safe, or Kanban. So, like, for example, if you have the behavior-driven development, you are thinking about the Gherkin format, and which the Gherkin format, which is essentially you do a test case first based on the action of the user and see how that test case will behave. And based on that, whether it's going to fail or pass the test. Based on that, then you can write the story. And then from the story, you can now write the code. That is what the whole idea about the Gherkin format, which is very, very interesting and good to be used in projects that are very new in the organization and complex. So XP or extreme programming, where you have a pair programming, which I've used in some of my teams when I realized that there are a lot of defects or bugs happening. So I simply get two team members, they pair and work on the project. And then once they are now very conversant with the project and doing well, then they part their ways and they can work not in silo, but they can work separately because we will be having the daily stand-up and other ceremonies that we sing. Then Kanban is a great framework that for vulnerabilities. I always recommend Kanban in projects that are very volatile. For instance, I've used it in projects, teams that handle mostly defects and teams that are doing a lot of maintenance, as well as one of my teams that was virtually running the architectural runway. So they will have to make switches from one environment to the other and do the maintenance. So when you are having those kind of projects, it means that the work is very volatile. So you cannot plan work into sprints, because if you're just applying Scrum where you plan work into your sprint, and usually you don't want to change your scope once the sprint is planned, and that's how Scrum is designed to work, so that you can avoid a lot of scope change. So you want to apply Kanban. I have even done a combo of Scrum Band, and very successfully with that too. So when you want to evaluate and measure the effectiveness of your project and adjust accordingly, that is the way to go with those ones. Now, another rule that is fast changing in modern, not just modern organizations, but organizations that are modernizing, is also the role of the product owner and the business or system analyst. So some companies are merging this role and just having what they call an engineering lead. So the engineering lead handles both the product owner role and the business or the system analyst role. Now, so the product, we all know that the PO owns the product backlog items and prioritizes them. What needs to be built incrementally. That is his key role in the, and of course, because he owns the product backlog and the backlog items, prioritizes them, what needs to be built. He is the one that accepts those stories as meeting the acceptance criteria, of course. So now that role is being merged in some of the organizations. So you see, usually what the system analyst, he or she will gather requirements, analyzes the scope relative to the software, hardware, and also how the system will fulfill the business needs. That's what it does. So now the engineering lead is taking upon all those roles. Now, but one thing we want to note in that what I discovered with those organizations is that when the delivery lead is merging and merging of those roles, when it's happening, there is some, or they are basically actually synchronizing what the product manager does, because he showed us some of those roles at the program level. Then the engineering lead, the agile delivery lead, and the product manager, you can call the agile delivery lead, or you can call it a Scrum Master, but the agile delivery lead does a lot more roles than what the traditional Scrum Master does. So the engineering lead, agile delivery lead, and the product manager, they work closely and cohesively on initiatives and epics for effective delivery. So when they meet in those meetings, that's how they are looking at those items and working them, because if you are probably implementing the SAFE framework, you have all the PI planning meetings, where after the capabilities, or some companies will call capabilities, some prefer to call initiatives, and then they come down to epics. All those meetings where they are prioritizing and aligning work that needs to be done in the PR. So how about cross-functional and self-organizing teams? I brought this one because I've worked in organizations where the developers role, you create stories, you write stories for developers and write stories for the QA. And I work for an organization that does not distinguish between those two roles. And so I discovered that actually separating the developer from the QA defeats the purpose of cross-functionality. Cross-functional means that each of these teams, each of the members in this team can take upon any of the scope. That is what's cross-functional. That's the whole idea of cross-functionality. So dividing those two roles defeats that purpose. Now, when you merge the two and simply implement peer reviews, so that now peer reviewing is very important, and therefore there's no need to separate them. And then you focus on individual success. Then the one question that I want to also find out now, because and see how other people, I remember I'm thinking that we'll have a good conversation at the end of this presentation on some of these ideas like this one. So do you focus on individual success or team success? This is important, because the way I'm leading the team is I focus more on the team success, unlike individual success. So when I match my team capacity and velocity and plan the PI and sprint goals as a team, what the idea here is that when you do your estimation and allocate effort points, but it doesn't, once you get your capacity, it doesn't have to, you don't have to have team members have a equal number of those effort points, even if they have the capacity for all of those members is the same. Because the complexity of the scope isn't the same. And therefore you want to run a team in lead a team in such a way that a team member can always step in and help out when they have bandwidth left. So that is what I mean by going in for team success, unlike individual success. So you ensure that once you ensure your team alignment, synchronicity, cohesiveness, and collaboration, you can just win. You can just win that part and then win it. So you list all the acceptance criteria with the check of brackets instead of subtasks. So My experience, leading teams where we create subtasks and leading teams where we just make sure that all the acceptance criteria have been identified and then entered under the story, under the acceptance criteria itself with brackets. So that each time that they finish with one of those components, you just check off that particular criteria. And that makes your daily stand-up smoother. And it makes you are able to evaluate how much work is left undone and how much is left to be done easily, rather than creating subtasks. You can, and in this one, if you want to also create subtasks, you can see have this check of brackets for acceptance criteria and also create a subtask. But to me, I wouldn't, if once I have those acceptance criteria all bracketed, and I don't need to create any subtask, because your subtasks do not reflect on your metrics. It's the stories that do. So additional, instead of the last point here, you can always have an additional assignee instead of creating a separate story for a peer review, an internal demo to the entire team prior to the PO acceptance. So that is another way you can go, but now in Jira, you assign additional assignee instead of creating a separate story for the particular another team member. So how effective are your ceremonies? That leads us to ceremonies, something that is very important in the Agile environment. And we don't just want to do ceremonies for the sake of ceremonies. You make them very relevant and effective. So this question here, how big are your teams? I think there's a typo there. There's another arrow there. How big are your teams? Do you do sprint reviews? Do you have a core hour? How often do you groom? All these questions they look so simplistic and redundant. But if you start looking at them now between the lines, you're going to see that the size of your team is going to determine how you lead that team. I just talked about a team that I led that was 28 members, one Scrum team. So I brought up to the team and we discussed as a team. And because I realized that if we were going to do just a spring review at the end of the spring, it would take forever, 28 members in the team. And then it may not be effective as well. So as a team, we agree and have it included in a working agreement that once its story is completed, it's demoed, even during the daily stand-up. It's demoed. So that by the end of the spring, we have only the stories that were not yet completed during the spring. And therefore, that gave us the impetus to be able to complete those the reviews at the end of the spring review. So you see how the wider question, how big are your teams? Then do you do spring reviews? No, that answers those two questions, what I just explained there. Now the core hour is something we introduce in the team, which is very important for when you have some technical issues during your stand-up. You don't want to hold up your stand-up, make it as brief as possible. Then during the core hour, the people that are relevant to that meetup, and that generally you have the Agile delivery, the engineering lead in that meeting. So that core hour is something that if you're not doing it for your teams, want to consider doing that. Then how often do you groom also depends on the kind of scope that you're working on. So you don't have to go by the book when you learn Agile. You don't go by the book because you want to go with look at the dispensations in your team, in your organization, and tailor that to suit that particular purpose. So because if you are doing a lot, your team is doing a lot of maintenance and a lot of defects, you don't need much grooming. But if you are doing front end to back end work, of course you need a lot of grooming there. Then how long are your ceremonies? That too is part of it. And with this, how effective are your ceremonies, and what retrospective games do you play? So these are some of the questions that I brought them up to elucidate some discussion at the end of this presentation. So how long are your ceremonies? Always, like, it depends on the size of the team and the scope that you are working on. You will see now in the book will tell you that a daily stand-up should last not more than 15 minutes, right? And that a retro is like 2 hours. Why will it use 2 hours in a retro, for instance? So the book is there just for guidance. So if you are doing something like a retro, if you are practicing SAFe, for instance, why will your sprint planning last 2 hours? It should last you no more than 30 minutes, 15 to 30 minutes. Because if you had already planned your PI and slotted all of your scope into the sprints, the 5 sprints that you are going to do, because sprint number 6 will usually be for technical depth and are now beginning to look at the next PI coming. So if you already have planned all of that, what are you doing in the sprint planning? I've seen things that don't even focus sprint planning when they practice SAFe, but that's the wrong idea, because things do change. During you have to still have sprint planning or your iteration planning, because you want to look whether your capacity is still the same. Are some people taken off? Has it changed? Is there any scope that has changed, especially if you're having vulnerabilities that you want to integrate in that sprint before you start it and move out some of the scope? Those are the things that you want to look at. And then automation, how much automation is happening in your organization? This is very important. I put it here as a note because the more automation you can have, it has so many advantages. And apart from saving time with all your team members, it is also a great idea to avoid vulnerabilities. Because when you are doing a lot of manual and your system is hacked into, during that time that you are doing manual, even when you are patching, imagine it is so open to, it's very vulnerable to attack. So if you can automate as many of those as possible, that's going to help you in that direction. Now, this is another one that I probably expect some questions again at the end of the presentation. The Agile release train or team by team PI planning. So SAFe tells us about now the art planning together. That's what SAFe recommends, right? I have practiced that in some organizations where we do that. Then I practice in an organization that we don't do it that way. And then I know the differences and see the advantages. So how big is your art? That is a determinant point. How long does your PI planning last? SAFe will recommend those 3 days, right? We're now starting with the vision and mission by the now upper management, and then alignment and all of that. Then the general session, then breakout sessions, and then you come back now on progress and all of that. So that is very time consuming, and they are not as effective as doing team by team PI planning and then doing a read out of the PI objectives to the stakeholders. I see the latter one to be a lot more effective, because as a team, as a team, you are able to work faster on your scope. And then once you have done all of that, all you need to do is go and do a read out of the PI objectives after you have done the feats of 5. And then you read them out to the stakeholders. Then the business value vote that we usually do at the PI planning, that can be done at the program level after they have gotten down from capabilities to either initiatives or epics, then they can do that. It does not have to be in a general session of the PI planning. So then how about a hybrid approach? So if you can have a general, this is what I haven't practiced, but I've been looking at it, analyzing it, and this is what I thought it could be a good idea, having a hybrid approach where one general session that will cover the vision, the mission and alignment. And then the teams go their separate ways and do their planning and simply come back and read the PI objectives. Then like I said, I already discussed the business value can be done at the capability and intake levels. How do you conduct a fist of 5 or confidence vote in your PI planning? This is a safe kind of a methodology, but I do apply it even in Scrum and other ones, because the whole idea of fist of 5 is having that confidence among teams members that they will be able to deliver on the scope that has been slotted into the PI or slotted into the sprint. So I think that is important. So the essence of adapting Agile to meet the organization's objectives and deliver on them effectively, that is what should be on your mind when you are choosing how to apply your methodology. Then a working agreement, which I go through this one pretty quickly. Everybody should know, if you're in the environment, you know what a working agreement or team norms are. How detailed and clear are your team norms? That is important. Is the definition of done clear? Are team norms respected and followed by the teams? Because I realize that sometimes teams agree on this working agreement, kind of shove them aside, and now people don't really follow what they agreed to do. So you want to follow up with them as a Scrum Master or the leader, the servant leader. You want to follow up and make sure that they are respecting those ones. Then how mature are your teams? That's another important thing, because the maturity of a team will determine how you lead your teams. So when you go through those stages of forming, norming, storming, and producing, and then you're going to, if you're just starting a team, and then it gets to mature gradually. Then are team norms published and visible to all? That's important, because you want to lodge those team norms in whatever tool that is visible that you are using. If you're using Confluence, you want that on your team Confluence page. So if they are not respecting it, just pull them out and have read out to the team on those particular points that they are not respecting, because these were put together by the team, right? Yeah, and then we'll be concluding this one with these few lines. So while responding to change, interacting individually, collaborating with customers in crafting a working software, this is what we should have in mind. Make sure that it aligns with the business, vision, mission, and action that delivers lean value to the customer. And of course, that should result in 3 things: productivity, profitability, and sustainability. Because whatever you do as a team, as a project, as an organization that is not sustainable, is going to develop some hiccups, and is going to run into problems. So copy and paste is not a good idea. It could take you to a year. You don't want to just copy from one organization and just paste in another. Just like you have now all these methodologies that we discussed about, whether it's SAFe, Scrum, TDD, FDD, Kanban. Now, you don't want to cut and paste, because as following the whole presentation, you realize that you want to tailor that to suit your organization. And that's why it's not a good idea. It could take you to Adia. Adia is a little town in Cameroon where I come from. It's a little coastal town. So that's why that came up to mind there. So we'll be able to answer your questions. And this particular session, we would love for you to be very interactive. And I will need other experts to chip in with your ideas and make it very interactive. So my name is Oliver Asaah. I am an Agile delivery lead, a servant leader, and you name the rest. It's my pleasure. Thank you very much. Over.
All right, we do have one question in the chat box, and it's by Ambrose. How do you demo a completed work during the stand-up? Does that not extend the stand-up for a team of 26?
Okay. Yeah, I stopped sharing. So yeah, exactly. If you listen to me, that team was 28 members strong, right? And I also said that you don't have to go by the book, because you have to tailor it to suit your teams, suit the organization. The book says that a Scrum team is a self-organizing team, cross-functional of 3 to 9 members. That's what Scrum says, right? If you have 28 members, that is more than 3 teams. So, and you want to respect your daily stand-up to limit it to 15 minutes, that's a joke. So that's why you want to demo those, once those stories are completed, you demo them during your daily stand-up. And you don't have to have all the team members in that particular demo. So the team members that the one that did the work and the product owner, and if you have a system analyst that is separate from that role, you can have those two and the Scrum Master, and that demo can happen. So you don't have to hold everybody hostage in that. To add to that, I have led teams that were in telecommunication, a lot of process work, where the process work is handled by the product owners. I have 2 part-time product owners because they also share time with other teams. So what I did is that during the stand-up, I prioritize the system work. So they do the studies, then I dismiss them, they go, and then I stay with the Scrum Masters with the POs, because they had a lot of process work with a lot of dependencies, where I created a whole spreadsheet tracking those dependencies. So that is the way that I suggest, that's the way that I practice in running big teams like that. Over. Let me bring some water.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Feel free to unmute if you'd like.
I like people talking than sending questions, That makes me, yeah.
Yep, go right ahead.
Hi guys, Ambrose here. Thank you so much, Oliver, for responding to that question. The reason why I asked the question was to also understand then how long does your stand-up run for daily? Understanding also that only those team members who worked on that piece of work can, for an example, stay behind, and the product owner, and in cases where you were channel analyst or business analyst. I just want to find out. Also, in addition to that question, when you then finally have your sprint review, how long do you have your sprint review for?
Oh, okay. In that particular case, the daily stand-up usually took about 30 minutes when we didn't have any demo. So it took about that for a 28 members strong. And then when we had a demo, the other team members were dismissed, and the demo, it just take how long? Probably another 10, 15 minutes, depending on how complex that particular story that is completed, the scope is. And then for the spring review, the spring review came down to about an hour with that 28 team members strong, and sometimes less, because a lot of the demos have been done during the spring, during those during the stand-up. I don't know if I answer your question.
Absolutely, it does. Thank you so much, Oliver. So from my experience, also, if I can share quickly,
Sure.
so I have worked, well, before we had the old work from home, COVID, and of course during COVID also. Before COVID, what I've had was I've got a team of about 36 actually, where how we got the stand up to be shorter was I insisted that everybody, it was a huge boardroom, everybody actually stand to have a proper stand up, and that started when we had the project sponsor who was present, and immediately project sponsor got up and everybody followed suit. So obviously, I mean, we don't want to stand up for an hour. We don't want to stand for an hour, so we sort of kept it short. So everybody had the responsibility of ensuring that the next person doesn't speak for 2 minutes. Otherwise, it means you're going to be standing for a longer time. So that was how that worked when we were at the office. And work from home, I inherited a team that, yeah, the stand-up is like, a whole 1 hour. So essentially what we then did was, to try to keep to the point. If there are items that, for an example, needs clarification, the folks can stay back on the call, to have that chat with the product owner or business analyst, as the case may be, just to be able to give that time back to the team. Because at the end of the day, what we find out is out of the 9 hours or 8 hours in a day that we pay for, from a financial perspective, folks end up spending 2 hours, 3 hours, in meetings, and productive times are gone. But thank you so much once again, Oliver.
Oh yeah, Ambrose, that's great, and that's why I recommended the core hour, so that all of those issues that need those clarity, they can discuss during that core hour, so that you make it a different thing altogether. And so the idea of a stand-up staying longer will be eliminated. Thank you very much.
Oliver, we do have a question. We have one of our LinkedIn Live is asking if you are willing to share your slides with them so they can look them over and read them by themselves.
Oh, sure.
Okay, so I can just have you, if you would like, you can email them to me, and then I will drop my email in our LinkedIn comments and in the chat here. And then if anybody wants them, they can email me and I will forward them on to anybody that would like them.
Sure, I will share them. I'll share them.
Yeah, just go ahead and email them to me. That'd be great. Thank you so much.
You want me to do that after the presentation?
Yep, after the presentation would be great. And then anybody who wants them can email me and I'll email them out in the morning.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
The whole idea of the community is sharing. Sharing knowledge is very important.
Yeah, a lot of people like them, so.
Yeah.
And I do have another question. Give me just a second. In here we have Brian has a question, and it is, can you share your general experience about the Agile understanding of project and development team members? Are they trained in advance of your participation, or do you have to train them?
Oh, okay. Great question. A great question there. Just as great as Ambrose's question. So it depends the maturity of the team. Remember, I asked that question during my presentation. So a team that, if you're forming a new team, you have to go through the processes of forming the team, nominate. Forming is not simply getting all getting all your team members together and then giving it a name. And then when in the storming phase, that is when you're going to do the training your team members on the principles of Agile, and then focus more on whatever methodology that you are implementing, whether it's Scrum, the pillars of Scrum, and so on. So you will train them gradually, and because it's as a whole new team. Remember, when you are starting a new team, they will not have gathered any velocity. So you don't know the capabilities of what they can do. So you just start, look at the scope and ask probing questions to team members, because you do not assign effort points to the scope. You want the team members to be the one to discuss the scope and the during estimation and say how many story points they can allot to any of the stories. So you start with that, and whatever they feel they are comfortable, that just making sure that they are following they are following the Agile principles that you lay forth, because that is your duty as a Scrum Master, to make sure they follow those principles. So it's your duty to train them as well in that one. And then as they are moving, by the time that they get to the, the third, fourth sprint, you have already gathered some velocity and you know the abilities of working. And then you can now begin to add the scope gradually. And the whole idea is that there should be continuous improvement. The velocity should be now improving. And then just things like that. You know the rest, what you need to do in Scrum. But if the team is mature, if you join an organization, the team is already existing, mature as a new Scrum Master, what you want to do is look at the metrics. Now check the burn down chart, see what's doing. See, look, you're looking for escape defects. Look at the bar chart and see where they're having escape defects. If they are, what level? Are they having a lot of scope change? If they're having it, what is happening? So are they finishing their work on time? You look at those metrics and then follow them as you begin to lead them during those ceremonies, the daily stand-up, through your sprint planning, sprint review, and retro. And retro will be a great opportunity at the end of the spring to evaluate how the last spring went. No, I usually love my favorite game is Glad, Sad, Mad. Glad for the things that went well during the spring. Sad for those that were so-so, and mad for that we really dropped the ball. So, but the most important thing is how to improve from there, from the learnings that you just had in the last spring. I don't know if I answered your question. If I didn't, you can ask a follow-up question. Thank you very much.
I think you
just
oh,
one
go
thing,
ahead.
something. Thanks, Oliver. I think it's also very important to always consider the team charter, or what is also known as social contract, because the value around that is, even as a new Scrum Master joining a new team, part of what you get is sometimes we have teams that have been working together, didn't have this mutual agreed processes, so to say, as per how the team will have their ceremonies and things like that. And for an example, because we work from home, maybe we want to book a whole 1 hour where there's no meeting, there's no disturbance. Maybe for an example, we want to have, for an example, in our environment, we have a no meeting Wednesdays policy, right? So things like that can only be discussed during the social contract or team charter. Part of what you also find is that as a Scrum Master, for me, I'm very big on mental health. So it means that you actually get your team to agree to how they want to work. That helps you, have a team that is self-motivated, self-coordinated also, and at the end of the day, delivering great quality products. Thank you.
Absolutely. That's why I brought the team norms or working agreement that you just very eloquently talked about there. It's very, very important because the team should be the one developing that. You just guide them so that they can own up to it and respect it. That was a very great point on this.